Welcome to the Eferia TechCast, where we bring you all things science, engineering, technology, and innovation. Today we are joined by Scott Alldridge, a founding board member of the IT Process Institute and a business operator who has built a multi-business portfolio, including an MSSP serving over 150 national clients. He co-developed the VisibleOps methodology to align IT operations with business outcomes and owns a Tier 3 data center to control the entire security stack. He approaches cybersecurity not as a technical checkbox, but as a fundamental business operations challenge. In this episode, we'll dive into his 80/20 framework for risk reduction and what breaks when scaling a tech business from 10 million to $100 million. So, Scott, welcome to the show, sir. It's an honor to have you here today.
Yes, thank you. Happy to be here.
All right, so let's dive in quickly. You have a refreshingly direct approach, stating you are not a cybersecurity guru, quote unquote, but a business operator. So, what was the moment in your career that made you realize that cybersecurity needed to be treated as a business operations problem and not just a technical one?
Yeah, great question, Ezekiel. First, and thanks for having me on the podcast today. I've listened to your episodes. It's great. I'd encourage everybody to go out there and give it a 5-star and subscribe and be a
Thank
part
you.
of the podcast because, yeah, it's good stuff. I appreciate what you're doing. Yeah, I think that too often IT is looked at as a business expense and just kind of a suck, if you will, of one time a CFO said, You hear that whistling sound? It's the suck of IT spin going out the window. The history and reputation of IT is often not on time, on project delivery, and over budget. So, how do we get to where we're driving highly efficient IT? Mainly because IT, compared to many other industries coming out of the industrial revolution, is kind of slow in terms of maturity as a industry. It's getting better over the last 20 years. In my career, about 28 years in IT, but it still lacks, and that's problematic. So, on the bigger picture of just IT in general, I think that IT doesn't do itself any real favors, and there's not been a lot of common standards and best practices that people have subscribed to. They've more gone to compliance and check boxes for frameworks rather than looking at truly efficient ways to manage IT systems that drive high availability and uptime so that users are more satisfied, businesses can rely on IT more regular, and then the business sees value. But as it relates to the last 9 years that we've really focused and led with our cybersecurity solution set at IP Services, our MSSP, what we see there is that too often then the mentality of the business leadership is that cybersecurity is an IT problem. It's somebody else's problem. It's not the executives or the leaders' problems. And the truth is that it is no longer an IT problem. It's a business problem. And the reason is that if you have IT that isn't really working stable or it's again over budget, not on time, sometimes there are workarounds, there are ways to survive and continue because some portion or some particular application may not be functioning properly. It can be costly, but it's not going to take your business down. But in our world now, as everybody's reading the news with all of the various threat actors and the various types of ransomware that's out there, one ransomware attack can literally shut your business down. In fact,
Mm.
studies have shown that 40% of businesses that suffer a ransomware attack within 9 months either go out of business or have to find an alternative path to keep their business sustainable, merger or something like that. So it is an emergency status. It's getting so bad with the threat actors and how they're coming downstream to even small businesses. Everybody's a target.
All right, that was really insightful. So, Scott, you co-developed the VisibleOps methodology. So, for the engineers and systems thinkers listening, what is the core principle of this framework, and how does it help align the often chaotic world of IT with clear business outcomes?
Yeah, kind of to my earlier answer, right? The better that we deliver IT services, the more stable the business is, the more profitable it can be, the more you can tie it to revenue and hopefully be a differentiator in your business and really not just seen as a necessity, but actually something
Hmm.
that can be integral in driving revenue. And of course, that starts with delivering really rock solid IT, meaning uptime, availability. In cybersecurity, we talk about mean time to detect potential threats or breaches and mean time to respond. Those are two KPIs that are very critical. But to your question, the idea that, how does a business connect, or for the engineers out there, how do they connect the VisibleOps methodology? It really was built on this idea that even recently I've seen studies, but back 15 years ago, there's multiple studies that have proven that all IT failure, lack of downtime and availability, is correlated to some unauthorized tested change. So often developers, engineers, traders in IT don't take change management serious enough. Sometimes they think, it's my area of expertise. I don't really need to take the time to document this or let a lot of people understand that I'm following a process around the change because I think it's really only going to affect me. And so there's a little bit of a mentality that it takes a lot. The studies show that 70 80% of all IT downtime and failure, lack of availability, drives a working thesis. That is, let's do a good job with change management because we know that's the big, you know, problem. And if we do that, we're going to knock a home run out of our availability. Interesting, factoid on the side. No security breach ever happens without a change or need for a change. Either I brute force in somehow and change something to get access into a network, where I do it in a sneaky way, but I'm changing something always. Or I convince, socially engineer somebody, fish or fly somebody to make a change that allows me to garner access to the systems of the network. So change management is the paramount IT process. And so we were really good at that back in the day in our operations. We were doing managed services back in 1999, 2000, before it was even cool or people even knew what managed services
Hmm.
providers were, let alone MSSPs, managed security providers. And so we learned that, working on change because of the studies, we stumbled on this thing called the IT infrastructure library. It's called the ITIL. There's a version two, and we've kind of married our operational things that my smart guys were really caring about, documenting changes, making sure that we plan them, cared a lot about the way items or assets were configured, the configurations and what state they were in. That was really important. Are they patched? Are they secure? Are they stable? So in order to do good change management, what the VisibleOps methodology does, it borrows from ITIL processes, and it really goes after three closed loop processes. Number one is we stabilize the patient, as it talks about in the book. So first off, we lock down a system. We make sure that all the configurations are secure, they're properly applied, and that the system is up and available and it's reliable. Then we electrify the fence, as it talks about in the original book. So nobody's going to be able to make changes unless we agree up front that we're going to follow some good change management processes. And then third is release management. And as we release things, are we doing user acceptance testing? Do we have dev test servers versus production servers, separating those, not touching live systems? And so when we get into good change management, are we classifying change? Is this a pre-approved change because it won't affect anything? Or is it a significant change? So we need to have all the stakeholders involved, have a forward schedule of change. We plan a maintenance window. We do all the good practices. We might have a change advisory board, we call a CAB. So change management's really at the foundation of that. And of course, that still relates today in my latest book that I authored. It's called The VisibleOps Cybersecurity. It's an Amazon bestseller. The third chapter, that's called The Efficacy of IT Processes. And what I'm doing there is going back to the foundational config, change, and release, because that's still so applicable today. It's still the number one factor. We know that 70 plus breaches start with an end user clicking on something or doing something bad. That's still your biggest threat on the cyber side. But we also know that the biggest thing that causes downtime and disruption in your IT systems is change management. So it's a common theme, if you will, that carries forward to not only help have better IT availability and management, but also gives us a more secure cybersecurity posture. It's very important.
Great. So you own a Tier 3 certified data center. Why did you decide to own the physical infrastructure? And what has that hands-on control taught you about security that you can't really learn from just managing cloud services?
Yes. So way back in the thousands when we were, kind of spinning out of what we called our advanced networking group that we labeled IP services, it was spun out of my micro businesses, which was actually part of a franchise of a Fortune 500 company. We saw an opportunity back in 1999, 2000. So to be able to start to host things, data centers were just starting to be a thing. There wasn't a ton of them that were doing a lot of co-location. And we realized that there needed to be kind of a niche place where people could incubate things. It could be highly secure. And we could partner with some of our businesses at the time by offering hosting services. So we purpose built a network operations center, a security operations center. And of course, because our property division owned the property and was building the building, we decided to go ahead and make space to build out a data center that is an M+1 system. What do you call tier 3? For every system, there's a backup system, automation in those systems to keep things up and available, multiple redundancy with power and cooling and internet connectivity to be able to host and then incubate. So it puts things right at our fingertips. Things were a little less cloud. We all now, of course, over the last 10 years have hosted our own private cloud, which is kind of unique because some of the public clouds, there are certain elements about that some businesses are not comfortable with. And yet it's been prolific, the public clouds, but they also have become much more expensive. So now of late, we're learning that in the, co-location hosting managed, private cloud space that can be in our data center, we can often provide, more capability for less money in terms of, ping power pipe and hosting. And then of course you marry it to our services, it becomes very efficient. So that's our thing. And then of course, because of our IT processes that I shared, we've always cared a lot about the idea that, these things really matter. Compliance matters. It's not just checkbox, but it's really utilizing those controls to make your business more efficient and more secure. So we went ahead and for years have gone through, it used to be an SAS 16 or a SAS 70. It's evolved. It's now a SOC 2 type 2, which is kind of the latest, which is kind of relevant to like ISO 27001 or other types of certifications that are out there. So that really does vet and prove through a third party source audit to say all the good stuff we do, our good kung fu, as I call it, in terms of IT operational excellence and in terms of good cybersecurity practices, we attest and validate through that audit annually that we actually do what we say we do.
All right. So let's talk about what you call the 80-20 approach to cybersecurity. So, can you walk us through it? And also, when a company fails a penetration test, so what are the critical 20% of fixes that will solve the 80% of their risks? And what is just noise?
Sure. Great question. Yeah, the 80-20 rule is really this idea that there are a few, and I've already shared today, it's kind of our secret sauce, but it's not. I'm sharing it with the world because altruistically, we'd love to have everybody have better, tighter, cybersecurity practices. But really, it's really in a couple of parts, this 80-20 rule that can really help you be compliant, but also meet compliancy, but also really enhance your cybersecurity posture. And it really comes down to this back to these foundational processes. Still a high percentage of breaches and threat actors will access something through something that's not patched or up to date. A lot like on our phones, when we have an update on our phone, sometimes people tend to ignore those. But more often than not, if you read the notes on that, they're probably patching, like an iPhone, an Apple iPhone, they're patching some security hole or threat. It's no different with IT assets, whether that's your
Mm.
workstations, laptops, servers, routers, firewalls, right? All those equipments in your network. So the 80-20 rule is that we get really good configuration management. We know what we have. We have a good asset inventory. We know that it's patched and configured and it's safe. It's in its secure state and it's functioning properly. That's the most important thing to keep the ultimate backstop of it. And then we wrap that change management around it so that we're monitoring and we know what is a good change, what's an acceptable change. Things like there are tools that you use in terms of monitoring things at the file level. So if Microsoft puts a patch out and it's updating 126 files, there's ways to validate that 126 files are the correct amount of files and that they're integrous, their integrity in those file management. So the 80-20 is to really get your head around, this configuration and change management. That's the first thing. The other thing is that we started to zero trust. There's a few principles in zero trust. It really goes into 7 pillars of zero trust as we break it down. But the one principle that we start with in zero trust is assume breach. Tell a story like not that long ago, year and a half ago, big or casino in Las Vegas, MGM Grand had somebody through the call center call in, and a chat password was changed that allowed a threat actor to elevate themselves in the network. That phone call, so a
Hmm.
lot of mistake, social mistake. They elevated. They ended up ransomware that they were down for 26 or 28 days, cost them $98 million. And then they actually settled with the data that was stolen for the class action for $49 million here just recently, a couple months ago. One phone call allowed $149 million ransomware to take place. Well, the cost of a ransomware attack. So the point there is that, you still can circumvent it through people. There's you have to add layers of security. Not one thing is going to solve it all. And also, MGM's a big, very, high revenue organization. They have the brightest cybersecurity professionals. They have all the tools. They have everything. If they can get hacked and, you know, cost them that kind of money, imagine what it can do to a smaller organization, smaller business. So that's one of the
Hmm.
principles. But the 80/20, back to the 80/20, really the core of that is really knowing your configurations and your configuration management, and that you have an asset inventory and that's all patched and safe and secured. And then you need to wrap it around good change management. If you're doing updates, that's a change. It could open up other holes. Then the third thing is to do a penetration test. So you test your network and systems to see if there's any gaping holes that are out there that actually a threat actor could so easily walk through. And then the fourth thing, four little things to do in a layer of multiple things that need to be done, back to the 80/20, is that you have to, the principle of zero trust is you assume and start with assume breach because of what I just said, like an MGM even getting hacked. So we care a lot about some of the basic IT, management things like backups. A lot of people think, well, we've got backups, we're streaming them off site to another location, to the cloud. But when the ransomware threat actors get into your network, they're very patient and they'll see where you're backing things up. They'll not only encrypt your local copies, but they'll find where it's at and then they'll encrypt your remote backup copies of your streams. So people don't understand it has to be encrypted end to end, and that a true backup should be what we call immutable and air gapped, meaning that if a threat actor is on your network, he can't find where your actual immutable backups are stored. It's not reachable by any access of your network on any kind of a normal basis. That's where we start. That way, if you wake up one day, get the call, the dreaded call, or you see the black screen that somebody's saying, transfer 25 Bitcoin to this address because I've got all your stuff locked up if you want the crypto key, you can actually say, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And then you need to know your what we call an RPO and an RTO. What's your recovery point in time and what's your recovery objective time? In other words, can we live with 4 hours of data loss, 2 hours a day, 2 days worth of data loss? And then how long is it going to take us to restore the data from the immutable backup? So these foundational things, these four things are things that could really be your 80/20 plan. Again, you know your configurations, you're following change management, you penetration test your network and systems, and then you remediate those big holes. And then lastly, you make sure you've got backups that are airtight and air gapped and immutable. That's going to put you in a really strong position to protect your organization, increase your cybersecurity posture, and keep you safe.
Awesome. That's truly insightful. So, for a technical founder listening who is trying to convince their board to invest in security, how do you frame the ROI? So, what's like the business outcome you tie the investment to beyond just avoiding a breach?
Sure. Well, one of the big fallacies out there is that we've got cybersecurity insurance, and there's a lot of misinformation about that. Cybersecurity insurance, unlike other types of insurance, is not regulated to the level other insurance is. So one policy might be really, really good and cover a lot of things. The next policy has a lot of fine print. And in the last couple of years, they've gotten really smart. In fact, in 2024, 44% of all IT cybersecurity claims got denied because they said you have
Hmm.
to have active threat protection on your network. There's certain things you have to have in place, these things. So I'll start with the business needs to understand that they can't just rely on their insurance policy and think that's going to get them by. It's not. Plus, it ignores a lot of the disruption and opportunity cost that even if you do get breached, the time that it takes, the data loss evaluation is incredible. People don't understand how valuable data is. payroll data. In healthcare, of course, health information is highly valuable. Financial records with, CPAs and financial advisors, tax ID numbers and social security numbers. And anyway, all of that is super valuable. So the ROI is pretty simple, right? We don't want to go out of business. We know 40% of businesses, they get a serious threat attack or ransomware, your business is at huge risk for going out of business or being damaged significantly. Number two, you want to make sure that you maintain your reputation. You don't want it out there known that you've got weak, IT security and IT systems, because then your customers likely won't trust your systems. So there is a reputation issue to consider. You can't rely on insurance because there's a lot of fine print. You should definitely know that you've got the right things in place. But insurance alone is reactive. It's not proactively keeping you safe. And then, one of the fourth ROI indicators is that, as you continue to drive availability and a lack of downtime or the distraction of a threat, of course, that's going to keep you in business, and it's going to keep you up, and it's going to keep your systems running, to keep your employees efficient. And there is an ROI. It's a little bit like IT in general, right? Sometimes it's viewed as this thing over here that just does what it does as a necessity. And people don't realize that, I think I read a stat somewhere that, we're all the way up to like 80% of everything we do in the world is some point in its process traverses some kind of an electronic or computer system. So it's touching about everything we do. Sure. So a financial firm in California is a great example. About 200 employees, not a huge company. They actually, one of their administrators deployed a new printer into their accounting office and left the administrative password to that printer as 12345, and it was connected to the network and wasn't properly protected. And so what ended up happening is, they were scanning the network. They found the port that was open, got to the IP address, and basically breached the network. And so it was actually the IT vendor that placed this thing. So anyway, he scanned it, got the network, breached it, sat inside the network and watched the emails going back and forth, got in their email system between the CEO and whatever, used AI to mimic about how they would write emails so it would look like it was authentically coming from one of them, and asked the CFO to make a transfer for $1,000 to one of their big clients into a different account for some work that they were doing. And so this became, a crazy thing, right? There were no red flags, no malware. It was just a simple overlooked, configuration, back to my configuration management of an IT asset that was really not properly set up with proper passwords, nor was it segmented on the network properly. So they were able to get in there and do terrible damage and cost the company a bunch of money. About 4 months later after that, that company ended up having to merge with another company to just kind of stay alive, stay in business. So again, it's not just about firewalls and antivirus, right? It's about awareness, it's about leadership, it's about building a culture of cybersecurity. That's really, really what matters. And putting the layers, being willing to invest and have representation in your executive leadership and your boards. They care. Another stat that I read is that just because a CEO decided once a month after they had a small breach to meet with the employees and be participatory in cybersecurity training, they just spent 15 minutes once a month. It totally increased their threats. They were getting, hack attempts and different things that people were clicking on that were getting fortunately caught by a lot of their systems. But they were able to drive that down by 73%. So again, that way people are aware that it's important. They always have to be on the lookout, just like you do on your personal devices as well, your home computers, right? Think about your phones. Your cell phones have so much information. We access financial records. We have our investments. We can get on our bank accounts. It's just really important.
So, Scott, looking at the threat landscape in 2025, what would you say is the most underestimated risk that mid-sized companies are completely overlooking?
Yeah, I think probably one of the biggest risks that they're overlooking is that they are not deploying active um, threat intelligence, is what we really refer to as. They're not using a security operations center, because the hackers don't stop. They're going to be 24/7, 365. You're connected to the network while you're sleeping. They're still trying to get in and do bad things. And that's, again, it used to be a lot of insider threats is one of your big concerns by certain processes and controls, but the external threats are really what over recent has been getting through. Again, mostly through the end user. So taking cybersecurity serious, excuse me, budgeting for it is very important and often overlooked. And then being willing to invest, right? Budget and invest on some basic cybersecurity services, right? Good backup and restore with immutable backups, as I just shared. But also, having active, you really should be using what we call an EDR, which is an endpoint detection response system. It's listening to signals out there across the world of the latest threat actors, and it will arrest the threat if your employee does click on a bad link or a bad website, tries to download something, it will freeze that workstation and not let your network get corrupted or encrypted with malware or whatever. So it's the new antivirus, and it's really important. That's called EDR, and that should be monitored with a SOC. And then there's this thing called basically, managed detection response that's looking at your whole network and seeing any attempts or hacks into your network with good intelligence. It uses some different subtools, but those are kind of three things, I guess. Number one, making sure you really have the right backups in place is super important. That's your an ultimate protection. Awareness with your people and your board to budget for it. And again, businesses, it's just a big threat out there, and then because there's nothing that's going to 100% protect you. And then really, you should have some kind of an EDR, MDR system working on your network. And quite frankly, most small to medium businesses don't. I think the last I read, only about 15, 18% of businesses have that kind of cyber in place. And it's not that expensive to do, quite frankly.
Right. So, Scott, you've built businesses in SaaS and e-commerce beyond cybersecurity. So, what is one lesson from those ventures that you've directly applied to building a better security company?
Yeah, so I'm a bit of a serial entrepreneur. I started into IT, when I was 19, software, and kind of reinvented ourselves over the years, as I referred to in the different types of companies. To ultimately a network integrator to a MSP to an MSSP. Along the way, though, I've diversified and own a couple of SaaS companies, and really, it's more around the software realm, but and software development. We're kind of at a time though where software development in some ways is getting easier to produce products. That's not the big thing. A lot of people like to think that there's a lot of, intellectual property, but you can, with AI and so forth, you can create so many things on the fly. It's helping development happen so much faster, coding. It's really what the big thing is your distribution channel. How do you have a network, right? Where do you to build a network where you get followership, listenership, subscribers. And so in my SaaS businesses, that's always the biggest challenge is really getting a broad awareness out there, a network, a distribution network that can drive a lot of activity and users. And so we do some freemium stuff, and we found that's worked very effectively where somebody can have a 14-day trial or they can have a little account that does a few things. The freemium model often is a good way because then they get to understand how the tool works, they get familiar, they get comfortable with it, and of course then they subscribe. So that's probably one of the biggest things is letting people try before they buy. In the other businesses is I think been a big thing, and then realizing it's about the distribution channel, the networking and the sales side. It's not really about the technology and the cool tool. Those can be ripped off, those can be recreated. We see that all over the place on the internet these days on SaaS businesses.
Okay, so what gives you the most hope about the future of cybersecurity, and what should we be realistically cautious about?
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that is, it's a little bit cat and mouse, a chicken or egg or whatever, right? The threat actors will come up with a new way to either hack a network or social engineer using AI is becoming prolific. So that's a big scare. But we're also seeing a lot of AI with the good side where it's early to detect AI threats. It's actually blocking them. We're using AI to get better, to create much tighter cybersecurity postures. A lot of good with AI. The other part of AI, and another book that I'm working on right now is called VisibleOps AI, which is artificial intelligence governance best practices. Because I read somewhere between like companies between 500 and 1,000 people, there's about 27 different types of AI that they're using and they don't realize because it's creating efficiency. So everybody thinks it's awesome. And they're putting their customer list, their financial data, they're putting all kinds of information, but they may not know, is that data secure? Do you know where it's going? Do you really have a policy in place and you're going to be protected? So that's a big scare tactic that's going on right now. But AI is probably the most encouraging thing that I see in the future for helping us, the good guys, defend against the bad guys. The other piece that's a little scary and we're trying to catch up with is quantum computing. As we see the onset of that it's not readily available. The threat actors right now are hacking a lot of data, not caring if they can breach it. They're just storing the encrypted data because they know that in the next 3 to 5 years, when they get a hold of a supercomputer, encryption today with today's systems, it takes several months to hack a system. And then often the crypto keys will change or something can get changed to protect it. And so it's a cat and mouse. It's easy to stay ahead. With the new super quantum computing, they'll be able to hack that same system within hours. So you can see where it's going. So the threat actors are collecting a bunch of data, storing wherever they can store it that they've stolen, knowing that in a few hours they'll be able to crack that data in 3 or 4 years. And things like social security numbers and other financial information, health data, that's going to be just as valuable then as it is now. That data stays valuable forever, for a long, long time. So again, but we're coming up with what we call quantum protected algorithms. Really, it's called quantum resistant. And so that is a cool thing that's happening. We're going to have to see a lot of systems, government systems, banking systems, healthcare. They're going to have to make some big upgrades in the next 3 to 4 years so that they've got that quantum level of protection of cryptography so those big supercomputers cannot easily hack the systems. So that's kind of both a good and a bad thing, right? I'm encouraged that we're doing and making strides with AI, encouraged that we're making strides with supercomputing to help protect us, but then that also opens up the threat on the other side.
Fantastic. So, Scott, part of the theme of this podcast is centered around innovation. And for that reason, I like to reserve one question on innovation for every guest that we interview on the show. So, in your work, which bridges deep technical infrastructure with high-level business strategy, so what does the word innovation truly mean to you today?
Yeah, I think innovation in our construct or applied in our business and my main, business of being an MSSP is actually around thought leadership. A lot of the things I've shared tidbits about today, I think that there's a lot to innovate, right? Creating looking at qualitative and quantitative proven science, best practices that are proven, not just what we think, managing by belief and not by fact. So I think that's a huge part of innovation is being able to innovate from good factual data and how do we actually apply it and make it practical and applicable in what we call prescription. So often the descriptive is kind of the science describes and qualifies and quantifies what works, what doesn't, what the problem domains are, and what can fix it, and they prove that. But how do I actually get that done, hands on? And that's where my VisibleOps cybersecurity book comes in because it's about enhancing your cybersecurity posture with practical guidance. That's the subtitle. And I really mean that. The first chapter we talk about it's a leadership problem. Leadership has to be involved. Security first has to be the mindset in your philosophy. Second chapter is about philosophy. Got to have a philosophy. Third chapter is about the efficacy, as I referred to it, of IT processes. Knowing that those really matter and they're your ultimate backstop, and that change management is as relevant to good availability of IT as it is to your cybersecurity program. Because again, no breach ever happens without change or a need for a change. And then I get into the thing called zero trust, which has been around for a long time. We've been proponents forever. And the idea of zero trust is really trust nothing, verify everything, as they say. It's this idea of least
Hmm.
privileged, which we've had around applications. If you're rolling an accounting program, you got an AP person, they don't need access to the general ledger. They don't need access to the module of payroll, but you might give them access granularly to do AP processing, accounts payable processing. So these police, you're taking that least privilege with zero trust all the way out to the edge, to the end user, to the endpoint. That's really what zero trust, and it looks at the 7 pillars, these layers of your IT systems from a cyber perspective and saying, you need to have these controls in each of these layers. That's innovation because we're able to now, in my book, take what is really the science and the proven methodologies that, quantitatively are proven, that having good leadership makes a difference, proven by quantitative data, that having a philosophy matters, and that processes really do account for protecting your IT ultimately. Now we go into the actual layers of the other layers of zero trust. So those are things like identity and access management. How do we authenticate people? How do we do that in a zero trust mindset? And I'll give one little example, and I'll end with this. I often liken the zero trust method almost like to going into a hotel. When you show up in the parking lot these days, they've got you on camera and probably 4 or 5 different cameras are watching you. And as you walk in the lobby, you've got more cameras. You might have a security, a physical person there watching you, making sure you look like you would be a potential guest. You go check into the front counter, you verify ID, they verify your driver's license, your credit card. They give you a key. Now, that key doesn't let you go anywhere and everywhere because you're at the hotel. The key will get you
Yeah.
into your room, not other guests' room. It's for a period of time. They know you're going to be there 3 days, 2 days, one night, however many nights. It's only good for that period of time. You won't get in the maintenance closet, but you might be able to get in the exercise and pool room. You can't go behind the desk counter, go in the back room, but you can certainly go to the lobby. So there's, that key card really is monitoring and giving you a specific access for a point in time to only access those specific areas that you should be accessing. What this does, if it locks down every other part of the IT infrastructure, the threat actors get very isolated. They might get into one room, but they can't go anywhere else. So the hotel analogy is really what zero trust is, and you do that through layers of security. That is innovation. I think that's highly, how you make that work and apply it, deploy it, and manage it, monitor it, and improve it. That is really the innovation that we camp in.
Fantastic. So, finally, for our listeners who want to learn more about your practical, operational approach to security, so where is the best place for them to find your VisibleOps book series and connect with your work?
Yeah, thank you. So my author website, you can get to my IP services company, the IT Process Institute from there as well, that publishes my books. It's my name, scottalldridge.com. That's SCOTTALLDRIDGE.com. And that'll get you there. A couple things though. My main book, 415-page Cybersecurity, it's an Amazon bestseller book I shared about earlier. And we've sold 350,000 copies of that series over the
Wow.
years. That particular book, I wrote an executive companion guide that's no geek speak, and it's a much smaller book. It's about 100 pages. It's got very practical guidance in there. Like it's got a Deloitte & Touche study that says, hey, you spend so much money on certain size organization with your IT, you should be spending this on your IT. And out of that IT spend, you should be spending this percentage on your cybersecurity program. So it's really practical guidance. I'd like to give your audience a free copy of that. It sells for $17.95 on Amazon. I will send my team, and I'll give you a number, a business text line in a minute, and my team will actually send you an electronic copy of that book, the executive companion to my VisibleOps book. And then I also would offer up, this is for just 3 of your listeners, I can't offer up all these, a penetration level 1 test. You could Google these. These cost $2,500 to $10,000. They're very valuable. They even look at how much AI might be, exposure of AI with a score on your systems as well. Very easy to perform. It's a patented process of penetration testing. It's a pretty quick process. It does not do any kind of invasive action on your network or shut your network down in any way. So you can do that. If you text me that, you just text secure25. We'll get you a copy of the book. We can get you the first 3 people. We can get you signed up for the no cost penetration test. You can take that back to your team that's doing your stuff, your provider. That might give them great insights. We almost always find stuff that people weren't aware of. Or we certainly, if you have gaps, we'll talk to you about that. I'd love to talk to you about that as well. So here it is, 541-359-1269. That's the number, USA, 541-359-1269. Just text the word secure25. And if you send that secure25, my team will get a hold of you. We'll get you the book. Somebody get in touch with you to schedule the penetration test. And that's kind of my gift to your audience.
Fantastic. That's a really interesting one there and a really great gesture from you. So thank you very much for sharing that. And I'm sure some lucky listeners will explore this opportunity. It's been a really interesting conversation, full of insights with you today, Scott. And I am totally excited and honored to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me, Ezekiel.